Hi, so I'm Tom Hunt, the Conservative candidate for Ipswich, and this is the first podcast that I'm going to be launching today. And hopefully, this is the first of many we're going to have over the next few months, which are going to be interviewing key players from throughout the town who are involved in many key issues that are needed to move Ipswich forward and to benefit the economy, benefit the society, and everything else. So today we've got Mark Ling from Oral Head, who's been very active over the last couple of days promoting a northern bypass for Ipswich. He's involved in lots of different things. He has lots of very strong, sound opinions about what is needed in Ipswich to allow it to achieve its full potential. He's been very kind to come here today and be the first person to be interviewed. So I've got three main questions for you today, Mark. First one is, what is Oral Head campaign? The second one is, why do we need a northern bypass? And the third one is, should Ipswich become a city? So I was wondering if we could crack on with the first one, which is, what is the Oral Head campaign?
Quite a lot to cover. But thank you very much, Tom. It's a pleasure to be here, and pleasure to have the opportunity and chance to put forward some of the ideas of Oral Head. Just as some background, I'm an Ipswich lad, so I grew up in Ipswich and grew up opposite Bromhill Swimming Pool, which is something else that I've campaigned for. Been in the shipping industry and transport industry for 30 years. Started here on Ipswich docks with Conship Container Line, and then I did 10 years with OOCL, worked in New York for a couple of years, worked in London for 4 years, and then joined Canadian Pacific and worked for them in the Gatwick area for about 8 years. And then for the last 14 years I've been self-employed, working for a US MVOCC and freight forwarder, involved in the US transport market. I exported British locomotives to Hungary and do the supply chain management on those. But I came back to Ipswich around 14 years ago and was pretty kind of distressed to find the state that the town was in. Not necessarily how the town looked or in terms of what it had, but just basically the whole attitude, the whole environment and the way people felt about it. Because when I grew up, I had Bromhill Swimming Pool across the road from me, I had Bromhill Library, I had Bromhill Park. If I'd have been a millionaire, I wouldn't have had so many things on my doorstep. So I really always valued Ipswich and appreciated it. So I was very disappointed to come back and find that Ipswich wasn't kind of seen in the same light that I'd always seen it.
So in a nutshell, the Oral Head campaign is about trying to reinvigorate Ipswich. It's about trying to help Ipswich achieve its full potential.
Absolutely.
Try and give it a spring in its step.
Indeed, yeah. I mean, you know, my background in shipping, I was a commercial director for North Europe, and had various portfolios and looking after project management and tariff and regulatory affairs and marketing, etc. So I came back and looked at Ipswich as I would look at any project, and however that size of that project is, trying to get down into segments exactly what is wrong with it, what's the core cause of the problem, and how we can tackle it. So I tackle it as I would do any business problem or issue. And what I did is I came up with this document, which is basically a tale of three cities. And it was just a very simple study, in very simple language, and it compared Ipswich versus Norwich and versus Cambridge, and just to see the three side by side, what they had to offer, what they felt like, what they looked like, all the social, economic factors that were involved. And what was quite interesting for me and quite stark is that Ipswich is the same size, the same power as Norwich and Cambridge. I mean, almost identical populations, almost identical centres, travel to work areas, and in terms of the size of the economy, if you take Ipswich with Port of Felixstowe and BT Martlesham, which were all built on Ipswich's infrastructure, on our labour force, on our skill set, we're actually a bigger economic zone considerably than Norwich. And yet, if you talk in East Anglia, you know, everybody wants to associate to Norwich, everybody wants to associate to Cambridge. Cambridgeshire is very proud of Cambridge, Norfolk's very proud of Norfolk, and then Ipswich, nobody wants to associate with it, nobody wants to be part of it. So I wanted to try and get amongst that and understand why. Sorry.
And so the second question is about Northern Bypass, and the third question is about whether Ipswich should become a city or not. But I wanted to, because I know one of the things that Oral Head have been promoting is a unitary authority, a greater Ipswich unitary authority. Because obviously at the moment we've got Ipswich Borough Council that's responsible for waste collection, local planning, town centre planning and whatnot, and the council housing stock. And then you've got the Suffolk County Council, highways, transport infrastructure, social care, schools, but to a lesser extent schools, as we have more and more academies, so it's played less of a role there to an extent. But it's, for me, I've always been in favour of unitary authorities, because I think I like the idea of a sort of one-stop shop. I kind of like the fact that, I haven't been a councillor myself. I didn't particularly like it when, I knock on somebody's door and they'd say, well, I've got a problem with highways, and I went, well, actually, technically, I'm a district councillor, so I didn't deal with that. I ended up getting involved in the highways issue because I didn't really feel like passing the buck. But I just think it'd always be better for democracy to have a unitary authority where that's your councillor, they're responsible for that, and also I just think it would give the town more weight if it had a unitary authority. Because you've got Peterborough, which is sort of not dissimilar in size. No. But Peterborough, you've got a unitary authority, and it's essentially Greater Peterborough. And it seems to work pretty well. Yep. So it's just, and obviously Peterborough broke away from Cambridgeshire County Council, a decade or so ago, and it's just whether there's a possibility that might happen here. Yeah.
Well, I think from the Tale of Three Cities, we then looked at what was the key issues, and two words came up repeatedly. One was representation, which you just touched upon, and the other one was authority. Yeah. And really, the whole problem goes back to the 1974 local government reform. So prior to that date, Ipswich was within its borough boundaries. It was a county borough, which was a unitary authority. It's had a charter since 1200 AD, from King John. So we have a right to self-government and have had for 775 years. In 1974, that was turned on its head. And what happened is Ipswich formed a Suffolk County Council with three authorities. So you had East Suffolk Authority, which was based here in Ipswich, and also Ipswich was a stakeholder and key influence. West Suffolk Authority, and then the County Borough of Ipswich. Ipswich was very powerful and had quite a lot of influence on there. That's now gone, and where really Ipswich Borough is not much more powerful than a town council. And then Ipswich expansion, because Ipswich is very successful and has produced a great deal of wealth for everybody, but that's all beyond its own natural boundaries, which means that East Suffolk Council, Mid Suffolk, Baber are now picking up the benefit. And then if you look, the larger houses, the nicer suburbs with bigger houses and positive, council tax, community charge, revenues, it's going back into other councils. It doesn't get reinvested back into the centre. All of the retail parks and competing retail parks are built there, and we've lost control of it. Completely lost control.
Do you think there's a? Because I sometimes think, and I know that the county council doesn't always get it right. In terms of Ipswich, I get that. I happen to be a supporter of the current leader of Suffolk County Council, Matthew Hicks. I think he's a good guy, and he certainly supports a Northern bypass from conversations that I've had with him. But I do think there's a point about the unitary authority, and sometimes it seems to me that, often I go around and knocking on doors and in different parts of Ipswich, and there's often potholes. And it seems that the Labour councillors in those areas are very good at highlighting these potholes and complaining about it, but doing precisely nothing to try and rectify.
No.
It just seems there's a lot of this passing the buck, and it seems that in some respects it suits Ipswich Labour, the fact that they've got something there to blame.
Everybody can argue.
Wouldn't it be good in a sense if Ipswich, from a governmental perspective, if Ipswich could take ownership of its own destiny and actually, stop the blame game?
You have general confusion because the public, voters, citizens have no clue who's responsible for what. Most people in Ipswich don't even know who Matthew Hicks is, and yet he's responsible for all of the key parts of local government in this town. The other thing that we have is that regardless of political persuasion, you have a natural history where Ipswich Borough tends to be Labour, Suffolk County tends to be Conservative. And what happens is the town gets ring-fenced, and you predominantly, over the last 45 years, 70 or 80% of the time it's been a Conservative county council, with usually nobody from Ipswich on the cabinet. And what happens is you have cabinet members coming into Ipswich on really core areas, on planning, on childcare, on adult care, making decisions for things that affect the town, which we made for 775 years for ourselves. And then suddenly somebody who's not a stakeholder, who's got absolutely no authority or accountability, coming in to make decisions on behalf of our town. What we want is we want to put authority back into Ipswich, and rather than seeing that as a threat to Suffolk, actually it's a really good thing for Suffolk, because Ipswich is the powerhouse. We have a third of the population of Suffolk here, and we have 2/3 of the GVA, which are all based on Ipswich's infrastructure and authority. And if you empower Ipswich, everybody benefits. And yet it's always seen as this like Gulliver, which is being pinned down by people because they're scared of it.
Do you think it's realistic that in the near future Ipswich could get a unitary authority?
If you look back, obviously since 1974, 50 of the major metropolitan and largest cities and towns have all gone back to unitary. And I spoke to the leader of Reading Unitary Authority, and they told me how much better it was. Because they're management too. As a director, I want authority. I want to know who's accountable. I want to know who's in charge, who's responsible. So it's worked for those 50. The only 3 that didn't get it, that put in for it, was Ipswich, Norwich, and Exeter. And they were blocked because they weren't seen to have the critical mass, because Ipswich is stuck in 1835 boundaries, which restricts us to about 135,000, and that wasn't enough to do it. But everybody knows the Greater Ipswich area is really 250,000. So if Felixstowe and Ipswich were working together, which is good for Felixstowe.
Because 250,000 people is about the size of the average London borough. So which would be an equal unitary.
It's not Ipswich takeover of Felixstowe. It's shared ownership, it's shared accountability, and shared benefit, really, because it gives you that much more leverage to have control over your own area. And Felixstowe shares the same highways, shares the same rail links, shares the same hospitals, schools, dentists, and retail. So it's within everybody's interest for that to happen, really.
We did discuss slightly before we started about the Ipswich Northern Bypass, and about how on Saturday Boris Johnson visited Claydon at the Best Western Hotel to talk to Conservative members, and he announced his support for a Northern Bypass, which my personal view is I think Boris Johnson is as a mayor, he was an infrastructure guy, and I think he's very pro-infrastructure. He sees the benefits of new infrastructure. So I definitely think there'd be more chance of the Northern Bypass happening with him being Prime Minister rather than somebody else. So I was pleased that he was aware of the campaign to bring the Northern Bypass.
It was a major coup,
it was mentioned in the local press. So rest assured that if Boris Johnson does become Prime Minister, and the next time I'm granted 5 or 10 minutes with him, and he tells me, look, what does Ipswich need? Northern Bypass will be right at the top of that list. So I know that you've been in the press today. You had a nice nice spread because you launched a petition to try and make clear to people the support there is for Northern Bypass. There's also counter petition from people who are opposed to it. And they're also writing me letters in and everything else. So what do you think's needed to win this campaign? What do you think we need to do?
From the offset, I'd like to point out that the people that are impacted by the bypass have every right to be upset and worried about it. I mean, I totally understand that. I totally sympathise it. Nobody wants to build a road across the north of Ipswich without good reason. And part of what we're trying to do, on the contrary, because we understand what we're asking for, how important it is, was to try and put a comprehensive argument and case forward so that people realise that it isn't just about this soundbite here or that reason there, that there's an absolutely comprehensive case of why Ipswich needs a Northern Bypass. And on every socio-economic factor, it's all pointing for the fact that not only did Ipswich need a bypass 25 years ago, we need one desperately. Every major factor that you look at. I'm in the transport business. When I first started in these buildings, the size vessels that we used to have come in were 1,600 TUs, 20-foot equivalent container units. They're now 22,000. When Orwell Bridge was built in 1982, there was 300,000 TUs or containers crossing it. 3 million now. We've got 1 million going on Ipswich's railway. It goes right through the heart of Ipswich. Every single container that goes through Britain's largest port goes through or around Ipswich. We are impacted. So this isn't just a problem for northern Ipswich villagers or for north of Ipswich villagers. This is a shared problem. It's a shared responsibility, and we have to find a shared solution because everybody benefits for it. In the area, I mean, I'll talk about the Leppin a little bit as well, but 15,000 jobs are directly or indirectly affected within this area. More than half the people that work in the Port of Felixstowe are from Ipswich. There's only 20,000 people live in Felixstowe.
Yeah.
So you can imagine a lot coming in from Ipswich. Ipswich was a port for 700 years before Felixstowe was even thought about.
Yeah.
So you've got all of that skill. We were one of the deepest Victorian ports that was built at that time. We had 22 engineering companies. They didn't choose Felixstowe because it had a nice creek. They chose it because the engineering skill was here, the workforce was here, the rail was built, the roads were there. And so, for that site, it's very important.
Do you think generally, in terms of like looking at this as sort of like a Suffolk project, important, critical for Ipswich, but Suffolk project? Do you think there's a bit of a tension between sort of sleepy Suffolk and actually trying to get Ipswich firing on all cylinders?
Oh, absolutely.
And actually being ambitious for Ipswich, and in doing so, being ambitious for this county as a whole.
Absolutely, and that also comes back to local government, where you have Suffolk county councillors that are coming in mainly from rural areas, making decisions on behalf of the urban dynamic business area. You have the cart leading the horse, and what we need to do is, as Boris would say, is put the mojo back into Ipswich, and equip Ipswich, give it all the tools to do the job, because if it does, the whole of Suffolk benefits. And the same with BT. BT was the GPO. It moved here in the 70s. It came down because we had 22 engineering companies, not because Martlesham had a nice chip shop. There was nothing at Martlesham. It was there because of the Ipswich skill set, the Ipswich infrastructure, and it's really successful. But at the moment, that benefit is not coming back to Ipswich in anything other than employment.
But it is, in terms of the cost of the Northern Bypass. I mean, it's depending on what kind of road it is, that could vary. But with costs going up or projects going up all the time. It's sometimes hard to know. I mean, I guess it could be 600, 700 million pounds.
Well, what I would say, I mean, Dan Polder has been out there, spouting £1 billion pounds for it. Now, if you look at the A11 upgrades, which was extensive, and A47 upgrades in Norfolk, they came to about 400,000, and that's a much more extensive project than the Northern Bypass, or 12 kilometres of road across the north. If you look at the Norwich Distributor Road, which is slightly longer, that came in at 185, and they're adding about a bit more to that just to finish it off. So where the £1 billion figure comes from, I do not know, and I don't think it's realistic. And also, I think it's a red herring at this point. But in terms of what it would bring in the long run, I mean, nobody argues about the Southern Bypass anymore. Nobody argues, is the Orwell Bridge, a monstrosity across this beautiful river estuary. Everybody celebrates it. Everybody benefits from the Southern Bypass. It's a road going through the middle of beautiful countryside. But my God, is it needed? And the same with the Northern Bypass. I think once it's built, the very villages and small towns that are north of Ipswich that are complaining about it at the moment actually are probably the ones that stand to benefit most.
It does seem, though, often when government are giving significant amounts of investment into an area for the transport scheme, they do also like to see housing attached to it. So it does seem that if the government were to be supportive of the Northern Bypass, if they were to give a significant chunk of money over to us to get it built, they would want to see some additional housing with it as well. My view on that is that you can see that as all being a negative, the extra housing as being a negative, or actually you can see, well, if it's done in the right way, if it's done in a sensitive way, sensitive to environmental considerations, is that necessarily a bad thing, or is it not an added benefit, actually having some good quality new housing in addition to a vital piece of infrastructure?
I mean, again, Dan Polder's been out suggesting that the new road might need 15,000 houses to justify it being built. For me, that's another red herring, because the fact is we've already got more than 12,500 houses planned by 3 districts anyway, on the east, the west and the north of Ipswich. The borough need to do 4,000 to 6,000. Mid Suffolk and Baber 3,000 to 5,000. East Suffolk District Council are dumping half of Suffolk Coastal's planned build down here. It could be anything up to 8,000. If you look, those are also minimals. There could be more than that. And those houses are going to be built anyway, whether there's a road or not. So we're halfway there, living on a prayer, as the song goes. We need the infrastructure ahead of that, and also, as I say, we actually, the bypass logic and justification was put forward 25 years ago, and it was it was justified back then, and they bought up the land and they had the bypass ready to go, and then it was blocked. and blocked for political reasons. And it was the wrong decision back then.
Yeah.
And now we've waited 25 years. The people of Ipswich area, it's not just Ipswich, it's Kesgrave, it's Martlesham, it's Claydon, it's Sproughton. All of the people benefit from the wider area.
I must say also, for reviews of this, but I conducted a transport survey 3 or 4 months ago. It didn't go out across the whole town, but it went out across significant portions of the town.
Yep.
In the north and central, east. And one of the questions was, do you support a northern bypass? 0 to 10. Overall, I think it was like 87% of people were like over 6 or 7.
Yep.
But actually, the average numerical score was 8.5.
Yep.
So actually, the number of people putting 10 out of 10 in terms of yes, I support, and it's 10 out of 10, was extremely high. So I think the level of support for it in Ipswich is crucial. And I think that Ipswich would be the big winner from Northern Bypass, but that doesn't mean the county wouldn't be a winner as a whole. It's not either or. And my view is that we've got to snap out of this, defeatist attitude, saying this is never going to happen. We can't be ambitious for Ipswich. We can't be ambitious in terms of what we ask for.
Yep.
We just need to accept the fact that we've never had it in the past and we're not going to get it in the future. We need to be positive and ambitious when it comes to
a lot of it comes down, exactly as you say, to representation, ambition, and accountability. And if you look at Norwich, for instance, Norfolk, with nearly £500 million worth of roads and highways upgrades, they're now pushing for the Norwich-Cambridge Tech Corridor. This was something that Ipswich was pushing for, an Ipswich-Cambridge Tech Corridor.
Well, it seems more logical to me.
We've got the biggest tech facility in the region here on our doorstep, and park at Adastral Park, and yet we're not pushing for it. There's no joined up approach.
I think that's better links between Cambridge and Ipswich are very important.
And another thing comes back to the LEP, as I mentioned earlier, that I would discuss about the LEP. Is a key driver. Now, on the LEP, when we first got involved as Orwell Ahead, when I used to attend conference meetings for the Lines, and I was looking around the table at my opposition, I wanted to know who was around the table, who was making it up. So I looked at the LEP representation, the board members that were making the decisions, which were really pushing the infrastructure projects within Norfolk and Suffolk. And 14 from 15 were closer from Norwich and Cambridge than they were to Ipswich and Felixstowe. So if you've got 14 out of 15 around the table, there's no surprise that the A11, A47, Norwich Distributor Road got all the background, or Norwich in 90. We hadn't got the seats at the table. Who do we blame for that? Well, we have to blame ourselves. It's up to us to make sure we've got representation around the table, and it's the right type of representation. So since we've campaignhed, we now have 5 out of 15. It's not enough, but it's still there. Micro detail as it sounds, I actually went through all of the board meetings minutes for the last 4 years for the LEP. And I actually did a study of how many times Norwich was mentioned, Ipswich, Cambridge, Martlesham, Felixstowe. And Norwich was mentioned nearly 50% more. Why? It's exactly the same size town or city in terms of population. It's got a smaller GVA and economic zone than us. Why is Ipswich not being mentioned as much? Why are we not talking about Ipswich? It's a very simple study, but that proves that we've not got the representation.
As we moving on to question 3, so this is about whether Ipswich should become a city. And there's been some coverage in the local press again about this particular point, whether it's should become a city. I think generally it seems that people are supportive of it. I'm all ears really, because part of me thinks that it is peculiar that Suffolk doesn't have a city. It is peculiar that somewhere as large as Ipswich isn't a city. But then also part of me thinks, well, actually, Ipswich is rightly or wrongly, it is a town. It's a uniquely big town, but maybe that town is part of its identity, and Ipswich Town, it's football club, Ipswich Town FC, and it's just whether or not. But having said that, I understand becoming a city gives you certain material benefits. It puts you on the map. There are certain. It's not just symbolic. There are certain benefits that Ipswich would probably get through being a city. But part of me does think we're a town. That's what we are. We're a town. And I don't know. So I'm sort of all ears.
I'd say two things. First of all, city status is a nice to have. Unitary is a have to have. So unitary is the one that would make real difference to Ipswich. Having control over your local government, having control of everything that happens here, accountability, authority is the most critical thing. most critical thing, and we've been missing that since 1974, and that has to be addressed. You know, I'm amazed that Suffolk County Council, you know, haven't woken up to this before. Since we lobbied again, we suddenly get an Ipswich portfolio holder on the cabinet, which is a start.
Yeah.
He was from Framlingham, you know, originally. So you got
now,
somebody.
now Ipswich.
but now, you know, with lobbying, we've got Paul West there, and I like Paul. And Paul's a
Yeah.
good guy, and you know he's represented. But he's one voice amongst 9. Why is it we have 1 in 9 when we used to have 100% of county control in Ipswich? It's not good enough. And then, you know, so that really needs to be addressed. We should have at least 30% because we were one of 3 authorities.
Do you personally think it should be a city? Would you like it?
Right. Anyway, so on the point of city status, but city status for me is quite important. And again, we could have had city status by now.
Yeah.
Let's not beat around the bush. If Suffolk had supported Ipswich before, when we pitched in for it, we would have had it. But Bury St Edmunds has always been in the background there, saying that they wanted it. Now, not being funny, Bury is beautiful. Everybody loves Bury. Bury's a super place. Having a city in its title doesn't really change Bury. It doesn't do anything for it. For Ipswich, we desperately need that. You know, and that's paying credit and due respect to Bury. You know, Bury is a great place, but it is what it is. Ipswich, you can fit 5 of Suffolk's next biggest towns in Ipswich and not touch the sides. We are by far Suffolk's most powerful, most important town. We were a regional centre. We had our own local government. We controlled the banks of the Orwell since you know King Henry VIII. You know, we had the responsibility all the way up to the port. We had 2 members of Parliament for 600 years, and now we get 1 and a dog's breakfast half. You know, so in that sense, city status is very important for Ipswich, and it is because it basically gives us a sense of place. You know, Ipswich is really down on us mojo. We're lacklustre at the moment. We need something to pick us up and get behind. Now, you know, if you look, we're the 12th largest county and the only county without a city in it. There's no rule that says that cathedral cities have to, you know, a cathedral has to be in each city. Cambridge doesn't have one. So you know, and Ely does, you know, and do you consider, you know, but as you quite rightly say, when you know, I've been there myself, when you're doing your marketing stats and when you're looking at where you want to invest, cities pop up first, and they're first in the pecking order. And it's also having, as a regional centre, why would the 750,000 people in Suffolk not want their you know, major centre competing on par with Norwich and Cambridge? Why wouldn't they? You know, you've got to empower it. You've got to give it the tools to do the job. So I think it's absolutely vital, and you know, also respects the fact that, you know, I get so fed up when you see reports on telly and it's like Ipswich is a sleepy market town. No, it's not. Needham Market is a sleepy market town. You know, Ipswich is a regional centre, and we have to change that perception.
Presumably, the football team would remain Ipswich Town.
Well, not be funny if that's the least of your problems of whether
Ipswich City.
You know, it's a small thing, but being an Ipswich Town fan, you don't have to change the name of your town. You know, from Ipswich Town Football Club, you don't have to change that, even if Ipswich is a city. It's a side comment. It's a red herring. The most important thing is we're not just being supporters of Ipswich Town Football Club, but being supporters of the town of Ipswich.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely. Brilliant. Well, thanks a lot for coming in, Mark. It's been absolutely
pleasure.
very interesting.
Petition, by the way, is on change.org.
Yeah, and I will be promoting that. And I think you probably have just about there. You've definitely convinced me about city status thing. As you know, I'm a big supporter of Northern Bypass, and as far as I'm concerned, haven't even started yet. In terms of the extent to which I'm looking to be pushing for Northern Bypass and fighting for it. Because that's what we need to do. We need a proper, energetic, relentless campaign to get it. Because the reality is that Ipswich is competing with all of the parts.
And it's equipping Ipswich for the next 50 years.
It is. So we need to.
And Suffolk.
We need to find a way of getting it done.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much.
Cheers.